No, that's a great introduction. I appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody ever tell you had a face made for radio? No? No? Hey folks, now we're going to talk about cost evaluation of an Intuiface-based project. At the end of the day, this is a discussion about ROI, return on investment. Part of Intuiface's pitch to you when you found us was the cost savings you can realize both in terms of resources and in time. But this isn't just about Intuiface itself. We believe strongly that this is also about the services you'll be able to provide. And so we believe it's ultimately important for you to be able to tell the ROI story and maybe even embrace it so you can look inwardly. Thus, let's talk about our objectives for this particular session. I want you to become familiar with the Intuiface return on investment story, help you learn how to use that story to your competitive advantage, and ultimately, finally, understand how analytics can act as a reinforcer of that message. It is not simply a thing you can sell to your clients, but we think it can make for a more compelling pitch up front and a more valuable project deliverable at the back end. Okay, so let's start by taking a quick look at the ROI story, the Cliff's Notes. Anybody know Cliff's Notes? This is, I think, a very American-centric kind of thing, but it's a study guide or a cheat sheet, as it were. So there's the long ROI story. We're going to get to that, but this is the short one. Intuiface versus custom development, 80% reduction in cost, 60% reduction in time. This is not something we've plucked out of thin air or that we made up. We base this on your feedback, years and years of feedback. And honestly, when you think about it, and as we tell you the longer story in a moment, it makes sense. This is logical, okay? But this is the Cliff's Notes. This is the summary. 80% reduction in cost, 60% reduction in time. What I'd like to do first, before giving you the longer story, is to justify this, right? I just said, it's kind of obvious that you have these kinds of savings, but is it obvious? So what I want to do is help justify this. Now, what I could just do is borrow a little pitch from South Park. I don't know if any of you have seen this episode with the Underpants Gnomes. And they had a brilliant plan. They just had to figure out phase 2. And at the end of the day, we could say the same thing about Intuiface, right? If you use it, something going on in the middle, a little bit of profit at the end. Where does that profit come from? What is it about Intuiface that gives you that return on investment? Okay, so let's this time really justify the numbers. First, with Intuiface, you could rapidly and iteratively prototype. And prototyping is something you might be doing at the beginning of an engagement before you've landed them as a customer. This is a pre-sales kind of thing where you're showing your prospects, we can build this for you. Is this what you mean? What do you think of this? You can do it rapidly. You can iterate through over and over again to make changes and ultimately do it post-sales as well. But certainly this leads to an accelerated sales cycle. You're speeding up the process. It is also providing instant feedback. Now here we talk about creatives, right? So the idea is you want to build something that satisfies the needs of your client, and instead of writing code and things are slowly gelling and coming together, with Intuiface you know right away if you're on the right target or not, and the creatives who may or may not be using Intuiface can very quickly visualize where you're going, where the project is headed, and what they can do to add their expertise to make it really a winning product. By using Intuiface, you can scale your business, scale the number of projects you can take on, regardless of their size, and also scale the amount of effort you can give an individual project. Pretty obvious. If you're spending less time developing, you can spend more time doing other stuff. Again, that could be additional projects for the same client, could be other clients, could just be a lot more creative work on an individual project itself. Turnaround. You're just going to have a shorter timeline. You're going to be able to deliver things faster. 80% cheaper, right? And 60% faster. That's a significant savings. And again, pretty obvious, but by being able to turn around these projects more quickly, that helps your cash flow and perhaps over-delivers for your clients. And there's never, ever, it's never a problem to over-deliver to a client. And finally, the agility to make changes and updates. Now, this could be, again, kind of during the delivery cycle for V1, but it could also be after delivery, right? I don't have to tell you, this happens all the time, that when clients see what it is you're building and it makes it real for them, they have a change of heart. Well, I really meant this, I didn't mean that, or since you could do this, what about that? I don't want to say it's scope creep necessarily, it's just a very understandable migration of needs based on what they see and what they learn. And with Intuiface, you can be very agile, make these changes quickly, both before and after project delivery. And finally, there's measurable proof. This is about content effectiveness. This is about analytics, where you can prove to your clients that it's working. You can justify their investment because you're showing them the outcome of that investment. Collecting data from these running experiences about what's happening out in the real world, who's using it, when they're using it, under what conditions, in what context. You're delivering all of this information to show them this is what you're getting for your dollar, for your euro, whatever. So all of these advantages, because of your use of Intuiface, drive those ROI numbers, okay? And it should make sense. You're all here, most of you anyway, because you're already using the product. You believe in it to some extent, I think, right? So now let's dive into the ROI story a little more deeply. Now you understand why we make these claims, why these advantages actually occur, the ROI advantages. Let's flesh out the story, okay? And this is on our website in the Doing Business with Intuiface guide, and we'll pop up a little reference to it. So on the left, you have project without Intuiface. On the right, a project with Intuiface. Let me build this. So on the left are custom development and deployment costs. Again, on the left, this is your writing code, HTML5, what have you. Custom development and deployment costs. Based on our experience with actual clients of ours, there's a significant decrease in cost when using Intuiface to build an experience versus the same amount of effort to deliver the custom code, okay? So there are some platform costs, that's the software. There are experience creation costs, that's the person hours invested in delivery. And there is a significant difference in the amount of resources that have to be applied to custom development than is applied to the use of Intuiface. So there's already a big difference, right? Now let's talk about the content, right? The creative aspect. On the left, there's a certain amount of creative, and actually on the right, there's a certain amount of creative, and we could argue maybe it's about the same, right? But here's the difference. Because Intuiface has saved you so much on the experience creation costs, you have a cushion to expand and invest additional time and resources on the creative, and you're still below the expense in terms of time and resource and dollar amount for custom dev. So you can over-deliver on content creation, on ideation, than you would have been able to do for bespoke development because it just takes longer to do it, right? And then finally, build it the right way. This is about selling the thing and putting a cost on it. So on the left, you now have some built-in margin, right? You're going to want to make some money here. So you have some level of margin, whatever seems appropriate. And that's what you price it at, right? Well, on the right, because your experience creation costs are so low, and because even through an expanded ideation and content creation phase, you're still below the costs for custom dev, you can actually come in below the custom dev price and exceed the margin that you would have realized with custom dev. So lower price, but higher margin. I know I'm idealizing, but logically this makes sense. And if you compare what you're doing for custom dev, we believe that in general, if you can deliver it with Intuiface, you really see a significant difference in cost with this result. And here's the beauty. Not only are you coming in below your own costs, and we'll talk about the competition in a moment, but of course this applies to competition as well. Not only are you coming in below your own costs, you're still making ideally a larger margin and exceeding the expectations of your client, the perceived value. We believe that if you are coming in perhaps at or below an already very fast timeline, with extensive interactive capability and lots of, analytics and content management work and all that stuff you're hearing throughout the rest of this webinar and what you know, this summit and what you know about Intuiface, their expectations will be exceeded. So your cost is below what you would have done for custom dev, but the client's perceived value is much higher, and that means repeat business. That's what that means. So yes, it's idealized. We believe 80% reduction in cost, 60% reduction in time, which leads to high perceived value, higher margins, lower cost. I mean, it kicks ass is what it does, I have to say, right? So how do you turn this to a competitive advantage? Well, first, it enables you to have a lower cost than your competition. If they're coming in with bespoke development, then by definition, you should be able to deliver the same, if not more, capability much more quickly, yet, as we've seen, still do it in a highly profitable fashion. You will offer greater transparency because you are iterating so quickly. Because you're able to deliver things on your timeline so quickly, your clients will have very early, very often exposure to your work. They'll know that you're on track. They'll have the confidence that if there's something off, they're going to see it early, versus bespoke development where I'll see you in 2 months to whatever the timeline is. Before I show you anything, there's much greater transparency here, which is something you should talk about, that your prospects will have the advantage of transparency when working with you. And finally, the relationship in general becomes healthier. You can more easily pivot to change the scope of a project. If their needs change, if they see something, if their budget changes, who knows, you could rapidly pivot, change the scope, and clients will love you for it, right? The ability to enhance, to go to the next level. Now that you've delivered V1, what can you do for V2? We see this a lot when it comes to Intuiface, that the early projects are pretty simple stuff. But the beauty is you can take it from there and add on to it, accrete new capability, and your clients will love you for it because you've already wowed them and exceeded their expectations. And hey, did you know all this other stuff we can do? They're going to love you for it. And that makes for a good long-term relationship. And finally, it means that you can easily adapt to future project needs that might be completely different from the existing project. We talked about, for example, Ahmed earlier had talked about, trying to create a recurring business relationship with clients. And that's one of the things this can do for you. By establishing this healthy relationship, you're really helping establish a long-term one that can result in almost a subscription relationship of some kind, where it just goes on, and that would be beautiful. There's one bonus advantage that I wanted to talk about, and this was the analytics piece. So let's talk about analytics. It's linked to analytics. Hopefully all of you know about Intuiface Analytics. The ability for your experiences to collect any data that you care about and visualize that data in the name of identifying trends, of understanding how well you're fulfilling key performance indicators to measure the health and effectiveness of your project. It's a very extensive set of capabilities around data collection and visualization, and it's a key to a competitive bonus that you really should embrace if you haven't already. And that's about measurable ROI for your clients, to actually measure it for them. So far, we've talked about the sort of amorphous benefit that you're going to realize your clients will see indirectly through what you charge them, for example, but you can deliver it yourself. You can collaborate with your clients to identify suitable KPIs for each objective, right? Help them understand we can measure these things for you to make sure we're fulfilling the objective you came to me for in the first place. You would then instrument these experiences to collect that data, deliver data visualization in support of those KPIs. That's the dashboards and the charts you can make with Intuiface Analytics. So you're showing the clients, remember those KPIs we discussed? Well, we're collecting data in support of those KPIs, and here's the real-time dashboard showing you exactly, snapshot right now, how's it going? And then create and execute action plans in response. This data has an impact. Right? You and your clients are learning from this data. Do you need to make a change? Right? Is it in the wrong place? Are you showing the wrong content? Or is it working beautifully and you should put it in more places? Or maybe we should extend it, and you get the point, right? So there's a reaction to this which continues that relationship with your client. So by measuring ROI for your client, you're showing a commitment to their project success. You're admitting if it's not working, you're going to know it's not working, client. So I'm going to be very honest with you, right? Meanwhile, you're educating your client about responsible project delivery. They're going to realize that you're offering them an advantage that alternatives cannot, because the alternatives don't talk about analytics. They cannot deliver this level of capability, which sets the stage for future collaboration. It's a beautiful story, right? So let me leave you with some final thoughts. The first is my advice is to turn the project economic spotlight on yourself. We talked about the cost and time advantage. Do you actually see that with Intuiface right now? Do you believe you're realizing that? And if not, why? And is there something you can do about it, right? We claim it. We've seen it from lots of our customers. If you are not seeing it, assess where are there inefficiencies, where can you improve things? Further, maybe look for economies of scale and adaptation options, right? So not only can you look inwardly and say, okay, we can do this better, but what can we optimize? What can we actually improve? We're good now. Can we be better? And later in the roundtable, we'll have this discussion about how did you adapt to the COVID era, right? When just the pipeline plummeted. And this notion of economies of scale and adaptation, I think, played a big role for those that were able to weather the storm. And so having this notion of efficiencies internally, I think, will go a long way towards helping you be more efficient. And finally, learn to speak the language of ROI. Talk about budget. Talk about return on investment with your clients. I'm not convinced that all of you do, and it might seem a little awkward and uncomfortable, and maybe you don't think you're talking to the right people. We believe that this is a strength you should build. To have this kind of discussion, illustrate your expertise, highlight your transparency, become a trusted partner, a consultant, and really talk about the true costs for them and the true value of the deployment. And if you can do that, then they're going to be less sensitive to cost. There's a lot of opportunity here for success, which makes it pretty exciting. All right, that's it, folks. I want to thank you so much for your attention, and I'm going to give it back to my lesser half. Thank you.